Hello, I'm Tim Robinson, Editor-in-Chief of AEROSPACE, and with me is Deputy Editor Steve Bridgewater.
Hi guys.
And brand new Features Editor Jack Richardson.
Hello.
Welcome to AEROSPACE NOTAM, another edition of our podcast and video cast looking at global aviation, aerospace and space news, and what we have upcoming in the next issue of AEROSPACE, October 2024. As you can see, we've got a nice new setup here. It's looking a lot more slicker. We've got a great crew. So the videos here, I think, if you're watching on YouTube, and why not, are getting slicker and slicker. In the magazine, we have everything from GA to spaceflight, from airliners to airports, from air law to eVTOLs. So the full gamelet of aerospace, space and aviation. So we're going to start off with what we've been up to in the past month. But first, we've got a new RAS fellow here. Stephen Bridgewater,
fellow with the Royal Aeronautical Society, and also Tony Pilmer, our librarian archivist at the National Aerospace Libraries. Yeah, what a huge honour. So thank you for everybody that played their part in that. It's not something that I ever thought I would reach the echelons of doing, but it's a great honour. Thank you.
Very well deserved, anyway. So what's been happening? I'm going to start off. I had a bit of a fun the past week, was it? I had a bit of a flight out with Honeywell on their 757 connectivity demonstrator. So this was demonstrating resilient, secure SATCOMs beyond visual line of sight. This aircraft is a test aircraft. It also tests engines, but it was at the moment is rigged up with 7 different SATCOMs, including Iridium, Global Express, and the idea there was we take things for granted. Actually, I mean, consumers, your phone is resilient. You know, you've got 5G, and then it drops to 4G, then it drops to 3G, and then it goes to. So your consumer devices are actually in some ways more resilient than military communications, which is a bit weird. So this was testing. This is an aircraft that's testing out different communications, SATCOMs in degraded environments where you've got jamming, interference, and things like that for customers. So mainly military and government customers. Really interesting flight. I've got to tweet out a couple of pictures.
I was going to say, did they ask you to go on this simply because the amount of tweeting that you do? Were you the prime candidate to check the bandwidth on this thing?
And because it was a test aircraft, it's an airline, it's 757, it's the 5th 757 ever built, I got to go in the cockpit. And we were flying there with the cockpit doors open, which is a real sort of privilege and rare, unusual experience. So where have you been?
I've had a very busy couple of days, actually, this last week. Last Friday, I was at Airbus Helicopters at Oxford. So they have opened their new Oxford HQ. Been at Oxford for a long time, been in an old 1930s hangar. They've now got the purpose-built facility, which they're not going to be building helicopters in, but what they're actually going to be doing is the final fit on the helicopter. So if you buy H135 or something like that and specify it with a certain VIP fit or a paint scheme or particular avionics, that's where the UK ones will be done, and also the police and the HEMS helicopters as well. So official unveiling of that, they've got about 12 bays where they can work on different helicopters at different times. Really interesting. The great and the good of the aviation world, and then completely unannounced, HRH, Prince William, Prince of Wales arrived. Very understated, just in jeans and a sweatshirt, not an official visit, very relaxed, clearly just somebody who loves their helicopters and loves their aviation. So it was nice to see him beaming from ear to ear, clearly back in his happy place.
Fantastic, excellent. So I've been up to my old kind of old haunts there. I went to go and see the unveiling of a new Spitfire sim at the Stoke-on-Trent Potteries Museum. So they've got the Spitfire gallery there. It's been a long running project, but they've now got an interactive Spitfire simulator at the museum in the Spitfire gallery, Operation Spitfire. Done by the great nephew, the great nephew of R.J. Mitchell. Was obviously born in Stoke.
Oh, of course, it was Stoke. That's right.
Yeah. So, and great to see that. It's going to be sort of centerpiece of a STEM project. They're going to get kids in to fly the simulator, because one of the things with the Mark 16 that they've got in there is people wanted to come in, and the first question they always had was, "Can I sit in the cockpit?" and they couldn't do it. And now they've got this interactive simulator and opened by Commander Nathan Gray, who former FAA test pilot, first pilot to land a UK F-35 on HMS Queen Elizabeth, who grew up in Stoke and was inspired, kind of like me, coming there, to Hanley. Go and have a look at the Spitfire in the greenhouse, along with Dr. Mark Jabble from University of Nottingham, who was he's an aerodynamics lecturer there, and it was his students that helped put together this simulator and make it bring up. So free entry. If you're in the Potteries, go and see the Spitfire. Go and check out the new Spitfire simulator and rack up some kills.
And did you fly it?
I did.
And was it good?
It was, yes, yeah. It's very realistic. Yeah,
it is realistic. Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
One that at home. What else?
I've seen some Spitfires.
Yes,
I went to Duxford. Battle of Britain Day, 15th of September, annual Battle of Britain Air Show at Duxford. It's always around that weekend, but this year it actually fell on Battle of Britain weekend itself, so 14th, 15th of September. Whole mismatch of aeroplanes from First World War types through to an F-35 and a Typhoon, but of course the real highlight was the Duxford Big Wing. So 16 Spitfires, 4 Hurricanes taking off en masse on the grass and the hard runway, and then forming up into this big formation coming through, making several passes. John Romain in the Hispano-Bouchon, which, for those that don't know, is a Messerschmitt 109 with a Merlin engine on the front. He played the Joker slot, so while the formation was building up, we got a 109 beating the airfield up, and then over the top came 20 Spitfires and Hurricanes. Really emotional stuff, especially with Churchill's speeches playing through the loudspeakers. So that was a real highlight. Really good. Yeah.
Good to see that happening.
What sort of F-35s were there?
It was an RAF F-35B doing a sort of a roll demo. So it's the first time I've seen this. I think it did RIAT, but I missed it at RIAT and at Cosford. But
I saw it at RIAT. It was amazing.
It was really good. So I've seen RAF ones do a couple of flybys before, so Farnborough and places like that. But this is the first time I've seen the roll demo. And yeah, it took me back to the old days of Vulcans because it set the car alarms off. Something which I've not seen Typhoon do, but F-35 set the car alarms off in the car park.
Fantastic. So, and the other thing this week, well, actually just last night, we had the RAS annual Amy Johnson lecture, celebrating one of the female pioneers of aviation. Really well attended, great lecture from Nicola Rosie Stevenson. She was a former Tornado F3 navigator, and now she's a human factors expert. Really, really interesting lecture. Not just about women in aviation, but also about human factors, passing on, swapping lessons between aviation and medical or healthcare, and also this kind of cockpit design, flight deck design, and ergonomics. So really interesting, sort of like the. One of the things she pointed out was B-17's accident rates in World War II, and one of the reasons was crews were coming back, and the flaps and the undercarriage switches were exactly the same, and they were next to each other. Mm-hmm. So crews, US crews were coming back from bombing missions, really dog tired, and maybe in twilight. And selecting on finals, you're selecting the flaps up switch instead of undercarriage down. So those little kind of really interesting lecture and a great Q&A session afterwards. So that was really fantastic. And the final thing is we've
won an award.
Well, we got a good mention, didn't we?
We did. We got an honourable mention in the Tabby Awards, which are the Trade Association Press. So this was a front cover that we did last year. When you may remember, we had a feature on the Hill helicopters. So Dr. Jason Hill in the Midlands, who's creating the HX-50 helicopter. The front cover that we had for, I think it's April or May 2023, 23 issue, received an honourable mention in the Tabbies. So another nice honour to chalk up on the victory board in the aerospace office.
Yeah, no, really good front cover. So let's have a look at, again, it's been a hugely busy month where the magazine is packed with news. What has been catching people's eye in the news this month? I'm going to start off. We've obviously had the first private spacewalk. You'll get to that a bit later on. But also, we've had a bit of a war of words between SpaceX and the FAA. Elon Musk and SpaceX, they're pushing ahead with space exploration. the FAA obviously is there to regulate commercial spaceflight, and there is a little bit of a disagreement, shall we say, going on there about how fast you can actually go, and how dangerous this stuff is there, and also the environmental impacts. So the FAA is proposing to fine SpaceX for two unauthorized, not launch. Well, I think one was an unauthorized launch, but one was something to do with a blockhouse. That they hadn't waited for FAA's approval. And the next thing also is that they're moving Starship. The FAA wants to move Starship's next launch in November, which. Musk and SpaceX are disagreeing well, because their whole thing is we want to iterate, build, reuse as fast as possible. Yeah. Get Starship. This is how they're making their progress. Is they're flying as fast as possible, getting that cycle up, learning at an incredible rate. And they're complaining that some of these environmental objections that the FAA is bringing up, or that other people have brought to the FAA, are kind of trivial and intent on sort of slowing things down and all the rest of it.
Well, they said the Starship's been ready since the end of August, hasn't it? It's been sat there waiting for FAA approval. It's good to go as far as they're concerned.
Yeah. So I can see both sides of the argument here. In that, if you want to get that flight rate up, and you look at something like what's happening with SLS, Orion, and also the Starliner. If you don't fly enough, then there's this huge pressure to get the flight right, every single time, so that's why the sort of tension is building up. So let's see what happens with that. Steve, what about you?
The thing that jumped out in the news to me this month was a story which we found through a very circuitous route, actually, through one of the car magazines reported this. So I've done a bit of digging into it, and it's a former SpaceX engineer, Nikita Amoshkin, who's created Earhart Aeronautics, and he's trying to create an autonomous light aircraft. And the contentious point here, and I say this now as a lapsed PPL, he refers to the pilot as a huge single point of failure in any aeroplane. Talk amongst yourselves on that one. So what he's effectively trying to do is create a fly-by-wire system which you just have a joystick. So there's no rudder pedals in this at all. And the idea is that you don't need to worry about flying the aeroplane. The pilot can concentrate on navigating, communicate. So, when you're taught to fly, the priority is aviate, navigate, communicate. So if we're taking away the aviating part, then the pilot can concentrate on the navigation and the communication side of it. And I think they've modified a Sling TSI, which is a 4-seat kit plane. They're looking at having that flying later this year with their software on. The first 50 they plan to provide in kit form, so you can modify the aircraft. But then they're looking at putting this into production. I'm assuming it'll be a modification of the Sling, but remains to be seen what that actual aircraft is. But I think this is really interesting. They're looking at kits on sale from late 2026.
So it's a bit almost like the company that's working on the tablet-controlled Robinson. Was it Skyrise?
Skyrise.
Yeah.
And of course they've got on the helicopter they've got the automatic auto-rotation button. So if everything goes south, you press a button, it finds a field and force lands for you. So it's a similar sort of concept here. So obviously, rudder pedals, I'm guessing for takeoff and landing, that's going to be an interesting algorithm.
Yeah. So
the nearest I've got to this is I did a little bit of flying a while ago in a civilian aircraft, which was had instead of rudder pedals, actually the yoke moved from side to side.
Ooh.
The Chrysley Air Jeep, that's what it was called, Chrysley Air Jeep. So you pushed and pulled for pitch, you turn for ailerons, and then you move the whole column from side to side instead of having rudder pedals.
That's just weird.
It was a bit like the Betamax of aviation. Everybody else went down the VHS route. It'd be interesting to see how this pans out. But if he comes to this with it's an ex-SpaceX engineer, if he comes at this with a SpaceX mindset, to revolutionise light aircraft, that could be very interesting.
So, but here's the question though: is that if you're approaching the leisure market with that, the GA, the private pilot, isn't that taking some of the fun out of the manual learning? The hand stick, you're involving all there. If you're just pressing a button, go there. I can understand if you're just doing it for eVTOLs or for passenger or for commercial. I just want to go to A to B. But the actual being in control, isn't that part of it?
I think it depends on what sort of aeroplane we're talking about. If we're talking about a Piper Cub or a Pitt Special, then yes, you want to fly that aeroplane. If you are in a high-end PA-28 or a Cirrus or something like that, that already is very push button. It's so. I think it depends. If you want to take off and go from point A to point B as easily as possible, then yes, this system. If you want to poop around the circuit on a summer sunny evening, then no. Not for me.
Jack, so what have you found in the news? What's caught your eye?
So on 12th of September, as part of the race to produce hybrid electric commuter aircraft, Heart Aerospace in Gothenburg in Sweden rolled out the first demonstrator of their 30-seat ES-30 aircraft. This aircraft is going to be used initially for ground tests, and the first flight is planned for Q2 of 2025.
Okay, so that's quite a big demonstrator, isn't it? I mean, when they were talking about, when they said, we're going to, so this is obviously Heart, Swedish company, we're kind of hybrid electric, kind of an airliner. It's quite, it looks full scale.
It does, yeah. So it is a twin-engined, scaled-down airliner. It's HX1, I think they've called it, isn't it?
Yeah. With four propellers on, isn't it?
Yeah. So they're also looking at these integrated nacelles, which are not going to be on this aircraft.
Right.
They'll be on the next prototype. But they think a lot of the aerodynamic efficiency that they're looking at is these integrated nacelles.
Yeah.
But they've got to the point where they've cut metal or composite or whatever it actually is. They're no longer a paper project. So, credit where credit's due. This was a project which is moving along at a pace.
Yeah, absolutely. I covered this for Aerospace a couple of years ago, doing a rundown of the various aircraft manufacturers in this area. So Aviation, etc. And so it's very interesting to see the first of these now rolled out.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
Fantastic.
Tim, anything else from you?
Well, so we wouldn't be in news without something happening at Boeing, and the latest thing. Well, take your pick. What's going on there? But the latest thing is now there's a strike going on. So. There was supposed to be a deal with the unions. There's obviously a new boss there who's come in, and he was making all the right sort of noises. I think we said in the last podcast actually that we had good vibes about him. Maybe that was a little bit premature, and. So the unions have voted to go on strike, overwhelmingly to go on strike. And that's obviously going to put a dent in the delivery schedule. They've already cut, orders for parts, and they're furloughing thousands of people. So once, there's just one thing after another coming out of the door issue. New boss, everyone thinks, here's light at the end of the tunnel. And it turns out it's a longer tunnel, and they're hit by another problem. So
there's also other cost cutting as well, isn't there?
They're quite magical.
Yeah, cutting back on their presence at trade events.
Yeah,
and there's something about catering as well. And
they have
so install my sandwiches.
Reducing catering budgets, cutting back on non-essential travel, and could even have to furlough staff.
So. Again, this is I've got to suspect we'll be talking about what's happening with Boeing in the few next podcasts.
Yeah.
What else is going on?
Good news.
Oh,
I've got good news for a change. Fly V-Bird. So Tomislav Lang. I've met Tomislav at various events. Moderated a forum that he was on in Milan last year. In Turin last year. Fly V-Bird are a low-cost airline which are forming in Europe, and their idea is they're using an algorithm-based booking site. So rather than a fixed cost from point A to point B, it's a bit like a cost share Uber type thing.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, they're using the plan is to use the Technam 2012. They've done their first commercial trials out of Friedrichshafen Airport in Germany. Used an airplane that belonged to Alpen Air. Everything went well, and they're looking now at starting commercial operations in May 2025. So a success story for Tomislav.
Okay, how do you think this might sort of change or differs from the stuff that was proposed by kind of Eclipse Air and the VLJ? There was one, wasn't there?
I could go even further. The very first interview I did as an aerospace journalist when I was in my early 20s was year 2000, and it was Richard Noble. Remember Richard Noble? World's fastest car. Noble, he was launching the Farnborough F1, and exactly this. But you would phone up from your mobile. Of course, we didn't have app technology. We didn't have all the AI and the algorithms that go with it now. I think technology has moved on, even from that VLJ point with Horizon Jet and people like that in the early 2000s. It was probably 2010 time, wasn't it? I think technology has advanced sufficiently that a business model like this could now work. Okay. Whether you would want to share an aeroplane with somebody else, I think is down to you. But if the numbers work for you, then this I think could be a very viable option.
Okay. And moving over to military stuff, there's the latest twists and turns in new medium helicopter, isn't there? Jack, tell us about that.
Yes, Tim. Yeah, as we wait for the new strategic defence review from the Labour government to start to get underway, there's one of the possible targets of it. The new medium helicopters had some twists and turns. So end of August, when the bids were due to be submitted, only Leonardo had submitted a compliant bid, Airbus having pulled out, but only for a couple of weeks later for Airbus to offer the UK renew its offer to have a factory in North Wales to produce the helicopter on offer. So is it will they won't they? Is it back on again? We'll have to see going forwards, and it's all a bit of a convoluted process when you consider that Iraq have managed to order a batch of.
What are they doing differently to us? I wonder.
So
maybe they don't want to build it in the country like we do.
I think that's the crucial point, isn't it? It's do we go out and buy a helicopter that's suitable for what we need, or do we buy a helicopter that's suitable for a need, but also adds into the UK economy as well?
So I mean, there were three original bidders, weren't there? So there's Leonardo, there is obviously
AW149.
Yeah, Airbus for your H175M, and then Lockheed Sikorsky with the Black Hawk. It's now Lockheed and Airbus that pulled out, leaving Leonardo. I mean, the problem here, I think, is that they're now talking about such small sort of quantity
number of helicopters,
so 22, 24 or something like that.
When originally they planned as many as 45.
So I think there's some people is it going to survive? Is it going to be cut, or they're just going to? I mean, one of the easier options, options might be just for ministers to look at it and just run the Puma on.
Run Puma on, or just buy a bespoke product. I think the cost is going to be setting up this production line. Is it worth setting up a line for that smaller number of helicopters?
Well, and the other thing also is the longer, because we've been faffing around with it for a while, because we've been the government's been hasn't made this choice, is that the longer it's dragged on, the more it gets closer to something like NATO next generation rotorcraft capability, or what the US Army is doing with FLRAA. And then you've got some kind of high-speed rotorcraft. It's the next generation. At that point,
and playing into this, Airbus have said that they can see a situation where the Puma does keep going until 2035, which takes us nicely into that time frame.
As I said, I was at Airbus a week ago at the opening of their HQ in Oxford, and CEO of Airbus Helicopters said exactly that. They will continue to support Puma for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other thing I went to, as well as Honeywell and Amy Johnson, I was out at a press conference with Wizz Air. So that's a Hungarian ultra low cost carrier. Great growth there in terms of the budget carrier. And they announced their first route for their Airbus A321 XLR long range is going to be linking the UK with Saudi Arabia, with flights from Gatwick to Jeddah in Saudi Arabia starting in March 2025.
Okay.
From £135 pounds.
I can't get from Nottingham to London on the train for that.
So really interesting press conference there, and CEO there sort of talking about the opportunities there of what the airlines are very, very excited about the A321. It's 2 hours more more endurance than a standard A321. A321 is already the most popular single aisle. And this puts stuff at 4,700 nautical miles range, linking lots more places. So it's enabling these sort of long and thin airlines to link up with these long and thin routes and sort of test them out and try them. So, interesting there. And when you look at also the other end of the route in Saudi Arabia and what they're looking at in terms of their kind of a vision for aviation, Saudia Group, Riyadh Air, Vision 2030. We covered it in the magazine last month on those sort of plans. You can see why people are now getting attracted to. We want to tap into this dynamic market. It's a very young market as well, and that's connecting these city pairs. But interestingly, he wasn't very keen on connecting the transatlantic flights. So some airlines are looking at doing the transatlantic flight. Problem with that is competition from the legacy carriers. Is that BA is going to eat your lunch, and the mainline carriers on that. And people have tried this before and failed. So what else have we got?
I've got another GA story.
Acafleagues, okay.
So for those that don't know, our President's Conference takes place 15th, 16th of October this year, and it is called Design, Build, Fly, and it's worked along the basis of the German Acafleague model. So the German Acafleagues are university associations where students studying for aerospace-related degrees actually do hands-on designing, building and flying of aeroplanes. There's a huge track record going back decades in Germany with this, and it's something which David Chin, our president, is trying to set up here in the UK. One of the main Acafleagues, the Stuttgart University Acafleague, they've had an aeroplane called the E-Genius, which is a motor glide. It's been around now for about a decade. Got various world records, and it's just set another one. So I saw this aeroplane at Friedrichshafen back in April. They were modifying it at the time. It's been through an 18-month conversion process. So it's now got bigger batteries. So it's an electric-powered motor glide. It's got bigger batteries, better cooling, four-bladed propeller, and they've now towed a glider. So it's a 750-kilo Arcus glider, so a two-seat glider, the heaviest glider ever towed by an electric-powered aircraft. But this thing is just done so that it's been modified in the past to run on hydrogen. It's won all sorts of awards for distance, for climb speeds, for heights. Now that it's modified, it can store 40 kilowatts of power. So that's enough to perform several aerotows to 800 meters. And then it just needs 90 minutes of charging. So it looks like, and lots of other stuff involved in this. But they've also got a system now, almost an autopilot, which will look out and spot thermals. So it's almost like automatic gliding. So
that's cheating, isn't it?
It's reading the airflow and getting the technology to make the flight as efficient as possible.
Wow. Okay. Fantastic. And you've got something that there you've spotted as well, low-cost missiles?
Yes, particularly, as the attempts to get weapons to Ukraine continue, another of the American startups has seen a gap in this market. It's Anduril Technologies, who have all sorts of interesting products, such as the Ghost rotary wing UAV, have unveiled their Barracuda range of missiles. So these range from the Barracuda 100, which can be fitted to helicopters such as the AH-64 Apache, or launched from the back of the C-130 under the palletized system. Then into the medium 250, which can be deployed from F-series fighters from 15 to 35. And then the larger 500 for larger targets. Now, the key thing about these is they can actually Anduril say they can be produced with less skilled labour and at scale in less complex factories.
Right.
So it looks like trying to shorten the supply chains there.
Yeah, I
and
think
ensure supply can be guaranteed.
I think that's like a really input. Well, it's a critical thing that everyone's wrestling with now is that their stocks are being depleted so quickly, and it's not a new thing. I think there's some kind of predictions from the Cold War gone hot in the 1980s of how long missile stocks would last, how long but the industrial base has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And now it's kind of quick. We need to scale up. How do you get these? How do you get these sort of? How do you get these weapons fast? How do you make them modular, adaptable? How do you scale up production? So if you need it, and I think it's not a factor of. It's not a case of we must build a big factory straight away. It's maybe can you distribute it as well? And yes, can you have these semi-skilled workers use fewer tools, use cut off the shelf as much as possible to kind of just produce lots of them.
Crying out for a cottage industry, isn't it?
Get that mass back. Yeah.
And now we go over to Specialist Group Insight, part of the podcast, where we've got Seth Moffat, Chair of the Flight Operations Group, in conversation with Captain Alex Fisher, also of the Flight Operations Group, talking about loss of control incidents.
Hello again, everyone. Today I'm joined by Captain Alex Fisher, a distinguished professional whose contributions have helped shape modern aviation. Captain Alex Fisher is a Cambridge graduate and OBE recipient. He's played a key role in the development and implementation of critical systems such as TCAS and all-weather operational standards during his time with British Airways. His extensive experience spans flight operations, safety protocols, and regulatory frameworks. In recent years, Alex has been deeply involved in researching loss of control in flight events, focusing on understanding contributing factors and developing effective mitigation strategies to enhance overall flight safety. Alex, of course, is also a valued member of our Flight Operations Group team. Alex is joining me today to discuss loss of control in flight events, a critical issue involving the unintended departure of an aircraft from controlled flight, which remains one of the leading causes of aviation accidents today. We're going to explore the causes, prevention strategies, and the role of technology in these events. Alex, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it. Nice to have you. So right off the top then, what inspired you to focus on aviation safety and specifically the issue of loss of control in flight?
Okay, well, I mean, any aviation professional, any professional pilot is going to be pretty concerned with safety. That'd be remarkable if you weren't. And loss of control in flight is the number one fatality risk. So it's the one you're obviously going to concentrate on, and it's in a sense it's what's left when we fix everything else, such as control flight into terrain and so on. So prime fatality risk for the last several decades. So therefore, it's natural to concentrate on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And in your experience, are there common trends or patterns across different loss of control in flight accidents that stand out to you?
Absolutely. I started totting up, writing down all these accidents when I joined as a representative of what was then the Guild of Air Pilots and Air Navigators. We were invited to join the UK CAA's Loss of Control Task Force, which I did in 2012, and the erudite conversations didn't seem to be based very much on recorded facts. So I went back an arbitrary 5 years to 2007 and started writing down and reading all the accident reports for loss of control in flight accidents. And it's immediately apparent that, I mean, the first thing that you see when you look at all these is that they're not the result of some dreadful failure of the aircraft or its control system. They're simple failures of, generally speaking, instrument flying ability to stay on the straight and narrow, to stay straight and level. And roughly 3/4 of the accidents are that. Roughly a quarter are failures to monitor the aircraft's power, attitude, and trim mix correctly. So, in other words, go for a go around, the power's got to come up, and what's more, it's got to stay up. So, and there are several accidents of that kind where the monitoring just didn't notice that either the power wasn't there in the first place or it disappeared. And another quarter, which I know takes it to over 100%, but it factors into some of these others, is that pilots, an enormous proportion of pilots, do not really understand how their longitudinal trim systems work and how they're different from the airplanes they train on. We can perhaps come back to that later on.
Yeah, certainly. So it sounds like there may be a gap in pilots' fundamental instrument flying training and skills and so on. And could this be addressed purely with more effective pilot training? Is that a solution?
Well, definitely. When one looks at these things, what we're talking about, yes, there's individual failures here, but the real failure is of the training system that either didn't train people correctly in the first place, and just as important, didn't notice that they were not trained when they were actually in their jobs. Is there something we can do about it? Yes, absolutely. Improve training, but again, something we can come back to. Just saying we'll make sure that there's there's a manual instrument flying exercise on a simulator check every 6 months is not going to hack it. Not in my opinion, anyway. You need whatever you do needs to be more frequent. And the other thing we need to do to get, as you mentioned, technology in this, an astonishing breakthrough in the last I don't know how many years. Is eye tracking. Now, eye tracking has been around for half a century, but it used to require a computer the size of a house to do it. Now you just put on a pair of glasses and they'll record what you're looking at, which is as near as, damn it, a bug in the brain to see what you're actually concentrating on. And instrument flying is all about a rational scan system that's directed correctly and with its prioritized correctly. That's the trick. It's bloody difficult, which is why not everybody can do it. But if you can't do it, you shouldn't be in control of a commercial airliner. And it can be taught. There's no question. Somebody managed to teach me. So it can certainly be taught, and it needs to be maintained. And how to do that, I think, is a big problem for the future.
Yeah, quite. I agree that an instrument scan is very important, and particularly with newer PFDs and things like that, the scan kind of changes and doesn't get practiced often. And I remember, going back quite a few years ago now, there was a video going around of I think it was a TUI crew in a simulator, and you could see two red crosses where their eyes were, and they could track where the pilots were looking, and they had an example of a good scan versus a poor scan, and that was going around sort of recurrent training programs and things like that. That's right.
And of course, the other factor that of course needs to be said, of course, is that you aren't necessarily using all these skills when with the airplanes, autopilots being more and more sophisticated. The actual amount of time people spend actually handling the airplane or when they have to handle the airplane is reduced. There's no question you aren't getting that much practice.
So do you think that an increased reliance on automation in modern aircraft has impacted pilots' manual flying skills?
It has, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. I'm not. Last thing I'd want to do is argue against increased automation, because it's. Apart from anything else, just look how safe flying is nowadays. It's astonishingly safe. You wouldn't. These are figures that you never have thought possible back in the 50s. But there are consequences of having all this automation, and that needs to be built back in somehow into pilots, because ultimately at some point or other they're going to have to exercise those skills.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned earlier aircraft trim. How important is understanding aircraft trim in larger jets? And do you think current training practices sufficiently address this? And I'm thinking not only in Boeing aircraft, but also in Airbus aircraft, where trimming in normal flight control laws is not really something that is on a pilot's mind. But as you work your way down the reconfiguration laws, it can become more and more of an issue, which is not something we really do in the simulator too often. Is that an issue out there these days?
Well, it is, but it always was. I remember when I converted from what I would call a conventional trimming aeroplane, which was not a PA-28 but a Hawker Siddeley Trident, where the fundamental thing is when you trim, if you're holding the aeroplane in with nose down column force, you wind the trim, and the column stays in the same position, and the load goes to zero, and that's what happens on most basic trainers that people fly, Cessna 150s and Piper PA-28s and so on. All these airplanes fly the same way. None of the modern jets do. What happens is that you've got an independently trimmable tailplane, a stabilizer, and if you hold the aeroplane again, if you push the airplane nose down and to increase speed, and you then want to trim, as you move the trim on the button, the control columns have got to come back to the neutral position. Now, I swear that all the people I flew with didn't know this. The training captains I flew with hadn't a clue. When I said it's all different, they said they used a rude word, and yet this is fundamental, and it doesn't matter normally because you're making such small inputs on the column and following up the trim all the time. You just don't notice that what you're doing is fundamentally different. When it does matter is when you do a go around, particularly from low speed, you need all the control, the elevator force you can get to stop the thing from pitching up. And if you then follow up with a trim, you better make bloody sure that you don't leave the control column still fully forward. You've got to come back. And that's what happened to the Dubai accident. The guy ran the trim forward 12 seconds and he just pitched straight down into the ground. He's not the only one to have done it. It's absolutely vital that people understand this thing, and yet, in my experience, nearly nobody does.
Interesting. And how about somatogravic illusions, if I'm saying that correctly? Yes. How can those affect pilots? And is there a method of training that can best prepare pilots for these sorts of situations?
Well, absolutely there is. I mean, the first, again, quite a lot, I think about a quarter of the accident reports actually cited somatogravic illusions as a cause. Now, somatogravic illusion is what everybody's, you can say, suffers from or experiences, and it's what the simulator manufacturers use to convince you that when you're in a box which is actually firmly stuck on the ground, that you're accelerating forward. They tip the thing back, and it's very, very convincing. There's no question about it. And if you're in an aeroplane and you aren't you're just in the thrall of these illusions, you will not know which way up you are. And there's a famous video, I hope you've seen it, of Bob Hoover barrel rolling his Shrike Commander with a glass of water on the coaming, which of course stays there. Of course, after his encore, have you seen this? He pours, he actually fills it with a jug of water, and he actually goes. I mean, it's just amazing. But so you cannot tell which way up you are from your body reactions without gyro instruments, and you have to. This is where we come back to your instrument flying ability. If your instrument flying ability is not up to much, then you can be swayed. And if you don't know that you've got to trust these instruments absolutely, then you are prey to these illusions. But you're supposed to do that as an instrument-rated pilot. And if you don't, then the accident's inevitable. But saying that the accident is caused by a somatogravic illusion is like saying that a building collapse is due to gravity. I mean, it's true, but it's not very informative. The pilot should have been able to overcome that, and if he hasn't, then that's a serious lapse in his skills.
Yeah, that's a fundamental skill, and as I think you alluded to earlier, a scanning issue as well, a lack of understanding of what the aircraft is doing at that point in time.
Absolutely.
Can you tell me, are there systemic issues in the aviation industry's safety oversight that need addressing to prevent these skill deficiencies among pilots? Is there anything that you've identified through your own research that's deficient?
Well, yes, I think I have. I mean, because there were 22 loss of control in flight accidents that I looked at. I stopped this in 22, I think. So there's been a couple since. When you look at these reports, the first thing you notice is that only half of them actually criticise the pilot handling. So there's a half where don't even mention the failures of handling, even though they're apparent to any pilot that reads the report. They're not mentioned in the report. Of those that do mention it, they're still pretty reluctant to follow through and say, first of all, are these failures unique to this pilot, or are they common? There's also a tendency for the action reports to look at the specific circumstances of the accident. Take the 737 at Schiphol that had a radio altimeter failure, which caused the auto throttle failure.
Yeah.
When the crew went for go around, they didn't notice that the auto throttle closed again. They spent a lot of time worrying about whether the crew should have known about this particular fault. To which the answer was, of course they shouldn't. I mean, there are a million ways in which auto throttle can fail. What the crew is supposed to do is notice that it's failed and take a corrective action. And if you, instead of just concentrate on this one particular minor item, minor feature of the event, and say what was wrong with their power attitude trim awareness throughout that, then you're onto something. Then you've got something to train to. But I mean, if the result of your investigation is, people should be trained about this peculiar radio altimeter failure, you're wasting your time. I mean, what about the other ways a thing can fail? You've got to make sure that people's awareness is up and running. Similarly, in all the loss of which are just due to lack of instrument flying ability, saying they need to train the go around more or something. Well, maybe, but actually, it was their fundamental scans that were full. And if you don't recognize that, you're not going to fix it. If you say, right, we're going to fix it by doing a bit more go-around training, well, you haven't solved the problem. And yet that is exactly what most of the action reports say. They concentrate on the specific fault and ignore the fact that actually this is emblematic of something much more serious and all-encompassing going on in those unfortunate few.
Do you have any idea why there may be reluctance to question basic flight crew flying skills during accident investigations, or is that too speculative?
I think there are two things. People are naturally reluctant to criticize dead pilots. I mean, who wouldn't? Yeah. But what they've got to realize, what's being criticized is the training regime that put them there, and the management regime that didn't notice that they shouldn't have been there. And I'm afraid there are lots of those. The reluctance, therefore, to criticize individuals is understandable. For the remainder, I tend to the opinion that actually that maybe people haven't noticed that it's the basic ability that's at fault, rather than the specific failure to handle the go around correctly, whatever it happens to be. Actually, that was emblematic of a bigger failure, which has gone unnoticed. And I think at this point I should just mention the one accident which I think got it absolutely right, and of all things, it was the Lebanese investigation into the Ethiopian 737 accident out of Beirut in 2010, I think it was. I've got it written down here. January 2010. The guy that wrote this got all three things right. He specifically criticized the crew's instrument flying ability. He asked very pertinently how on earth that was not noticed by the airline. And also cottoned on to the fact that, well, this guy obviously had got a good instrument flying capability at some point in his career, but 21 years later he didn't, and therefore we've got to maintain this. So full marks to I wrote his name down somewhere, I've forgotten it now. Absolutely spot on, and that's the only report that I've seen out of all those 22 that actually mentioned all those things specifically. You could argue that the recommendations that follow from that weren't quite as perspicacious, but they were pretty bloody good. But the only one, all the rest miss out one bit of that. Like they don't mention, they don't question the company ethos that says, that make sure that people remain good after they've been hired, for instance.
Yeah, the fundamental skills are maintained. Interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me, in our last episode, we discussed upset prevention and recovery training with Dr. Sanju Advani. And how do you think that UPRT training and basic instrument flight training complement each other to ensure that pilots are well prepared? Is there more that we can be doing in those areas to bring those two together?
Well, certainly. I mean, first of all, there's no question UPRT was an amazing success for the society and for Sanju. I mean, it was just astonishing the way that took over, and UPRT is built into aviation codes throughout the world now. I mean, it's been amazing. Unfortunately, I mean, there's no point in doing upset recovery training for somebody who can't fly straight and level. And we missed that. And because it was always assumed that people could, and you just needed to bolt on this extra bit. Sadly, no, that's not the case. So we've got to go back and check this, check the basics. I have a few modest proposals on how one might do that. And as I said, it doesn't involve more hopelessly expensive trips to full flight simulators, which I think are not well geared to do this. Sorry.
Go right ahead. I'm interested in your suggestions. Yeah, let's hear them. Absolutely.
What I proposed this several times, and just before COVID, we were setting up a trial with BA and Cranfield to test this out, which is basically that there are amazingly clever part task trainers available. Think of Microsoft Flight Sim, where you can put somebody in and just do an exercise without having to simulate a whole flight. You can just zero in on one little thing that you're interested in doing. And what's more, if you think about it, you only need a couple of minutes per day of something like that to keep your skills up and running. And we were hoping that, to show that was valid, not only by just asking people, do you feel better for doing it rather frequently, but actually doing eye tracking to see how their scans change through over a period of a week or whatever. And I'm glad to say that, I mean, obviously COVID happened and that all fell by the wayside. I'm glad to say that I think we're going to be able to resurrect it again with Cranfield. And in fact, it's going to be the Guild of Air Pilots, but I mean, it's we're all in the same game. I hope we can relaunch this exercise. I think it's valuable, and I never heard anybody say no, it's a rotten idea. So, and it gets away from saying, oh, you've got to go and fly the airplane manually. You've got all these wonderful gizmos on the airplane to keep it flying safely. What on earth do you want to do? Why would you throw them all away? I mean, it's ridiculous. So we've got to supply this some other way.
Yeah, fascinating. So if there, just to wrap things up here, if you could be king for a day and there was one significant change that you could implement into the overall, training regimes of airlines around the world that you think would reduce loci incidents and improve aviation safety, what would that be?
Well, it'd be, it's unproven as yet, but it would be something along the lines I just mentioned, which is a much more frequent but very brief, so you can actually afford to do it. A refresher of your fundamental skills. I hope it would work. I hope it works. I hope we can prove it works. I'm very confident that with, as I say, this eye tracking is magic. It's like having a bug in the brain. When I trained, you needed a very insightful instructor to see that you weren't cheating. You know what instrument flying like. You can cheat. You can do. Yes. You can get the crowd result, everything unsteady by working like a one-arm paper hanger. If you're doing it properly, you should have time to light a fag, do the crossword, and still keep the airplane flying.
Yeah. Certainly, as an instructor, there are some telltale signs that someone is sort of hyper focused on one instrument and not scanning. Whether it's a flight path indicator or a rate of descent, but not scanning the rest of the instruments. There are things that you can see from the back seat. That's for sure. That there are telltale signs. That's great. Captain Fisher, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a great conversation. It's been lovely speaking with you. And thank you for everything that you do for the Flight Ops Group and the Royal Aeronautical Society.
So we're going to go take a look at what features we've got coming up in the upcoming October 24 issue of AEROSPACE. So who wants to lead off?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Go first. I really enjoyed this article. A lot of what we have in the magazine can be quite technical at times. It's really fun to get a story which has got a technical angle, but has actually got a real human element to it as well. And this is an article which has been written by Air Marshal Sean Reynolds about a particular C-17 Globemaster, RAF Globemaster mission that was took part in 2014. And it was an evacuation of people from South Sudan. And it's a human factors feature, because he's called it "May the holes in your Swiss cheese never line up," and it will become obvious when you read the feature where that comes from. But it's looking at that layers of human factor, risk assessment, and in a nutshell, as the C-17 was on its way from Bryce Norton to conduct this evacuation, a tweet went out announcing their intention. So they were suddenly at 30,000 feet en route with a go, no-go decision, because they weren't sure whether they were going to be met with friendly faces or unfriendly faces when they landed. But it's told, it's an article with a really good lesson to it, but it's told in a very, very readable way. And I think you're going to enjoy this, guys.
Yeah, loose tweets sink fleets.
Oh, yes.
That's a modern take.
Yeah. So what about you, Jack? What have you spotted?
Well, one thing we've got in here on the sustainability theme is an article by Naomi Allen, the Society's head of research, talking about sustainable aviation fuel, and specifically talking about how a complaint against a Virgin Atlantic advertising campaign, saying their fuel that a Virgin Atlantic advertising campaign was upheld, and she goes into issues such as how this sustainable aviation fuel is produced at source, so emissions in those terms, and also how to factor in different options such as hydrogen.
Yeah, because the UK mandate is coming in 2025, so this is really timely article that actually looks at it ahead of the. I think possibly it's going to become a surprise to some operators maybe in 2025. So
I think there's been a few instances recently with the Advertising Standards Agency looking at these greenwashing campaigns. And I think we're probably going to see more of them, because there is this move towards the mandate, and we've got to be, as an industry, very upfront about what this fuel is. And say it was the Virgin Flight 100, wasn't it, that was the first transatlantic airliner with sustainable aviation fuel.
And everyone's getting in on this act. So the RAF announced earlier this month that sustainable aviation fuel was being used to fly Typhoon and Poseidon aircraft from Lossiemouth.
Okay.
Well, I think the Typhoon flew in the display at RIAT with SAF for a year as well.
That was the first.
As Naomi said, 100% SAF is not 100% of the solution.
Exactly, yeah. So what else we've got in this issue? Accident reporting delays. So this is from Nick Butcher. And he's looking at it. Well, there still seems to be some pause or still delay in reporting commercial, big civil airline accidents. Obviously, aviation safety, civil aviation is incredibly safe at the moment, but we still have it's that delay, and sometimes it's down to bureaucracy. Sometimes it's down to maybe the depth of the investigation, and sometimes it's down to countries that are worried about coming out embarrassing information coming out about their safety culture. So he's really sort of like calling for some of these outstanding accident investigations published, and for a better, quicker kind of process in getting these out. So as we are learning, and you haven't got there this what might be a safety issue that's bubbling under. That could be prevented. I think that's the main thing is for that kind of cultural thing to spread a bit more widely, and for people to kind of get their act together. So that's really interesting stuff. What else have we got?
Another accident investigation article, actually. It's actually from one of our young members.
Yes.
So our Young Persons Network, Early Careers Network, looking at 3D accident investigations. So I like the fact that this is from one of our young members, and it's looking at the future of air accident investigation. So this is using drones, digital cameras, digital mapping to map out an accident site. And it's something which is being done now by the police forces with car accidents, things like that. and how can we roll this out into accident investigation with aircraft. So A, it's a really interesting article, and B, it's great to see some input from some of our young members.
Definitely.
So it's almost expanding the digital twin concept now.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, we talk about digital twins from design to disposal, recycling, but maybe not from design to lying in parts in a field. But yeah. What about you, Jack? What else have you spotted?
So we've also, with the new government having approved an increased number of flights at London City airports, we've got a big article this month on the game of actually producing bigger airports. So, for example, Istanbul Airport has had its 5th anniversary and is now the second largest hub in Europe. There's also examples from Poland, Vietnam, and Dubai's new airport, which could potentially be the biggest in the world, but it also doesn't gloss over the difficulties in this part. So saying about how Berlin's Brandenburg airport has been subject to cost overruns and the 10-year delay.
I think the Poland one was interesting because it's actually a combined airport and rail terminal, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. So it's a combined transport hub. So that's maybe something to look at in the future, particularly for countries in Central Europe, where you've got particularly that really good rail network already, is integrating it into the air travel.
And the interesting thing also, I think, with one of the interesting things I spotted with the Istanbul airport is they're talking about triple runway operations. You've heard of double runway operations, and you sometimes see cool photos, don't you, of San Francisco, of aircraft coming down in parallel. Triple one, so that's pretty.
It's also the taxiway, wasn't it? Because they've lowered the taxiways so that you can taxi past the end of the runway without causing an issue with aircraft landing over the top of you. So it's a very interesting feature, actually, and also looking at how Istanbul has been developed with the needs of customers, and also customers with extra needs. So there are apps there for visually impaired passengers and all sorts of things that actually sort of will nudge you around the airport to where you need to go. So clean sheet design has given them the opportunity to do that.
Excellent. Okay, and we've also got some articles in there from, one's a conference report. So I was at the Global Air Space Chiefs Conference back in July now. But some very interesting stuff that came out of there. A whole load of 50 plus air and space chiefs from around the world, and some really, really, top level discussion on air power. And one of the things that sort of sprung out there was the chief of the US Air Force coming up there and flashing a notional light fighter on the screen there about. We must, instead of build to last, we need to build to adapt. And this is actually really topical at the moment because they're now rethinking NGAD. The US Air Force, is now, we're going back to the sort of square one. They're not backing away from it as much, but they're having a rethink, and so this has thrown a whole lot of confusion around. What exactly are they talking about here? Is it more drones? Is it more collaborative combat things? Is it a lighter thing? They've still got the same. They've still got the same strategic problems, Indo-Pacific, long ranges, and air defences, contested environments. The A2, D2 bubble, pushing that back. But there is a whole question now: is does it need to be penetrating, or does it need to be stand in? Twin engine maybe. So that was a pretty interesting kind of thing from the chief there, among everything else. Air power and deterrence was the theme of the conference, and really, really good stuff. And then also we got a preview from Gordon Woolley and the RS Flight Sim group of a upcoming Flight Sim conference in October. Some very interesting stuff going on there. People who are regular listeners to the podcast know I like my flight sims. These are the professional flight sims, but the consumer's technology is kind of merging with the professional stuff. So augmented reality, virtual reality, low-cost training devices, eVTOLs, training eVTOLs, but also interesting. One of the things about a synthetic air traffic environment, which isn't really sort of simulated at the moment, in that you are, you go into the full fidelity simulator, and it's quite sterile. Whereas in real life, you've got people, talking over the radio, and that level of extra pressure of what a real life airport is like, with people talking on the radio, missed call transmissions and things like that. With AI now, and with speech recognition, or probably ChatGPT and things like that, we're now probably at the level where you could probably build that into a simulator. Obviously, you wouldn't drop someone there in the deep end straight away. Yeah. But you can now then gradually increase the level of realism, so that when people are doing a really sort of a flight towards their end of their training course, maybe, or a type rating, why not give them the full experience of Heathrow Airport or New York Airport on a busy day, and you get all that stuff in your ears. So that's really, really interesting. We've also got Afterburner coming up this issue. So in that, we've got stuff about a YP-SAT, which was a satellite designed by young people that flew on the first Ariane 6 flight. So that was really, really interesting. A young person's project. Design, build, fly into space. We've got It Fly, so that is a report from the aircraft design and handling competition run by Merlin Sim, where students design their own aircraft and it's then evaluated by a test pilot in a high-fidelity engineering academic simulator. We've got a report from the Washington, D.C. branch. They had some ex-FAA administrators there on a top-level panel. Again, really, really interesting stuff, really topical. Some great stuff coming out of the Washington, D.C. branch. Got the Oral Histories project from our library. And we got book reviews and obituaries and all the new members and new fellows.
Yeah, new fellows. So I've got one more thing, actually. Our front cover, Polaris Dawn.
Yes.
For those, how could anybody not have seen it? But the Polaris Dawn mission, Jared Isaacman sticking his head into space. Bella's not here now, so I've got to take up a bit of this space mantle, I think. It was so cool. I know it wasn't a proper space. They didn't go out on a tethered line. To give you some idea, I live in a tiny village, as I've said before. The village WhatsApp group was going crazy with people watching the live feed of Jared Isaacman and Sarah. I keep saying Sarah Michelle Gellar. That was Buffy, wasn't it? Sarah Gellis, I think the name was, doing their spacewalk on Polaris Dawn mission. Just incredible, and that iconic photograph of Jared going out and raising his arm, and as he said, we've got problems down there. The Earth looks like a pretty special place from up here. But my favourite comment was actually when he went back in. I don't know whether you saw this. They went back in, and because obviously they had to depressurize the entire capsule. They put the lid on and repressurized, and he went, "Smell that? That's space." And I thought, what a great line. So, and that is our front cover. We have that iconic photograph on the front cover of AEROSPACE. I think it's just one of those pictures that will go down in history. And I got quite emotional watching it, I've got to admit.
Yeah, I did. I mean, there was obviously a lot of, there was some criticism from some quarters saying, billionaires in space, etc., etc. I think that missed the point. And there was also some poor reporting saying, unprofessional astronauts. I think, so hang on, these people have been training, one's an USCF pilot and a former astronaut. Other two are SpaceX engineers. Jared had obviously flown on the previous Polaris mission. They're not. Inspiration 4 mission. They're not amateurs at this by any sense.
Hardly space tourists.
Yeah, exactly. And they were doing science there. They were doing. So they've got a whole load of experiments sort of lined up. They were doing a communication with the Starlink satellites as well. And this is the first step on. And one thing that struck me is, it was only 14 years ago that the Dragon flew.
Yeah.
And now it's doing regular trips.
Yeah.
And SpaceX is launching 100 launches a year, 100 launches. So if you look forward and you go, where are we going to be in the next 14 years after this, step into space?
This was one small step, wasn't it? And I've also got to say, Sarah playing the violin in space, playing Rey's theme from Star Wars. Absolutely priceless.
And connected by Starlink.
escalated by Starlink to people around. For any criticism of billionaires in space, that was a great bit of outreach. That was on another level. So
fantastic. We shouldn't miss that. Yeah. So and so for Afterburner, obviously Bella is not with us. She's on maternity leave. But send all your branch news and events to features editor Jack here, Jack Richardson, at jack.richardson@aerosociety.com. Keep us in touch, send us your branch reports, what's happening in your diaries. Right, we're now up to upcoming events, shout-outs. What have we got coming up we want to shout about? Steve, you've got something down?
TAG. Yeah, I'm going to TAG, Tamworth Aviation Group. I mentioned this last month. It got postponed. I'm doing it this month. So Tamworth Aviation Group, I grew up in Tamworth in Staffordshire. They have me back every so often to go and do a talk on an aeronautical related subject. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to talk about yet. But
Being fellow?
I could do, yes. Jolly good fellow. On the subject of that, I actually went to Tony Pilmer, recently became a fellow as well. He's our librarian and our archivist. He went to the Rolls-Royce Heritage Trust, which is very close to me in Derby. So I went and saw him speak about Sir Henry Royce. The Life and Times of Sir Henry Royce to the Rolls-Royce Heritage Group. So again, another. If you're looking for somebody to come and speak at your branch, I can highly recommend Tony.
Fantastic. So I mean, we're obviously into the events, and the events and the lectures, events, conferences going on around the society. It's always networks. 400 plus events a year. So here's some of the highlights coming up. We've got a fireside chat with FAA Administrator Mike Whitaker. 8th of October, RSHQ. Rare chance to see the FAA chief in the UK. That's going to be excellent. Design, Build, Fly conference. We've already mentioned that. That's the President's Conference. Really looking forward to that on 15th to 16th of October. Connecting academia with industry. We've got our Flight Simulation Conference. We already mentioned that. 22nd to 23rd of October. And the RAS Corporate Partner Briefing on 30th of October, Rowland Berger. That's going to be on contrails and contrail management and things like that, and how to kind of, I suppose, not monetize it, but manage it and monitor it, to monitor or not monitor. So that's going to be another, don't miss event there to go to. And obviously for corporate partners, exclusive for corporate partners, Chatham House Rules, really good kind of a place to go there and network and meet the right people. So, on that note, we're going to finish off our usual round the table kind of thing. What are we watching, reading, playing in terms of aerospace stuff? Have you got any?
Yeah, it's something I've recently read is Lieutenant Colonel Dan Hampton's memoir Viper Pilots about flying the F-16 CJ Wild Weasel over Iraq. Very interesting, recounts his training with some very funny stories and his deployments to both Gulf Wars and an interlude on exchange with the Egyptian Air Force, which is worth reading about. And it's something I thought was worth revisiting, given Ukraine now has its first F-16s in combat.
Yeah, I mean, I've read that as well. He's quite scathing about harms, isn't he? He's more in the, obviously there's the SEAD, suppression of enemy air defences, and there's DIAD. And he's very much in the DIAD, hit them with cluster bombs and make them go permanently away. So that's excellent. Yeah. What about you?
Two, actually. I've been listening a lot recently to the Cold War Conversations podcast. You've seen Cold War Conversations, been going for a couple of years now. They look at first-hand stories of people that lived through the Cold War, whether they were from a military background or civilians, and also some very interesting accounts from people that were in former East Germany. How they particularly growing up in former East Germany. So lots of stories like that. But I've also just finished Lou Alessandro's book, which is Imminent. So Lou Alessandro worked for the Pentagon. He was in their UAP department. Right. It's a really interesting book. Yeah, he doesn't go down the rabbit hole of Little Green Men or anything crazy like that. He comes at this on the basis that there is something in our controlled airspace and we do not know what it is. And it is a threat. And he goes down, as you may well, Lou resigned from his job to effectively whistleblower and bring this out into the wider sphere. So his book is really, really interesting.
Fantastic. Okay, so I've got a couple of things to flag up. First off is Aviation Extended, so a podcast I'm involved with. They've been doing a thing on Cold War Coastal Command or Cold War Maritime Patrol. And one of the latest episodes there was interviewing former CEO of the Royal Aeronautical Society, Sir Brian Burridge, talking about his days hunting Russian submarines, Soviet submarines in the Nimrod. So he was a Nimrod pilot, and he was on the extended podcast talking about it. So hunt that out. We've also got a podcast and also a video from two students who joined us at the Farmer Air Show. That's Angelica and Alina from the Solent branch, and they did a great wrap-up video. If you're on the RAS YouTube channel, do go and look at that, talking to other young people. They interviewed people from Airbus, Spear Systems, Boeing, DSTL, reserve astronaut Megan Christian. Really, really good video. Young people interviewing young people about the exciting world of aerospace. So go and look at that out. That's a good watch. And then the other thing is, from the flight simulation world, MSF 2004 is nearly upon us. It's going to be released in November. I'm going to have to look about getting somehow getting a new PC, I think, or a new graphics card. It's got a new aircraft, including eVTOLs, and including, I think it's got the Heart in there. The Heart, HS20. So it's got the Joby in there. It's got the Archer. It's got balloons in there. It's got like gliders, helicopters.
So this is Microsoft Flight Simulator. So this isn't an add-on to the existing one. This is a brand new version.
Brand new version. So the last version obviously modelled the entire world, and satellite data, big data. The whole kind of world in staggering detail. This has gone to the next level. And what also is interesting here is they've gone to a career mode. So basically, the idea is you can fly your PPL. And then you can go off and do aerial firefighting, or search and rescue, or bush flying, or delivery, or VIP corporate flights, as well as airlines and stuff. Those things were you could do those things in the previous versions, but it was usually buying some of our add-on pack or things like that. And now it's all built into Sim. So they've just started. Some of their previews are coming out now, and frankly, it's staggering. The last one. 2020, it also coincided with lockdown. And I think one of the reasons why it was so popular was everyone stuck at home.
Yeah.
And there was this amazing, I think it was basically showing people what they were missing when they weren't flying. Air travel completely closed down. Oh, well, you could go in your home computer and fly. And the amount of sales they've got, in the millions for the first version. So I think it's going to be a bigger hit. I just hope that my computer will be able to. And that's it. So finally, we're going to go around there. Where can people keep up with us with the Royal Aeronautical Society and the magazine?
Me, I am on X as @RAES Steve B. I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook as Stephen with a PH, Stephen Bridgewater.
Jack, where are you?
Likewise, I'm on X @RAES Jack R.
He's new that, a new handle. Go look him up. Go follow him. He's going to be busy. I'm RAS Tim R. Still on X. Still tweeting, posting there. Obviously, Aero Society for the main site. Aerospace Insight is where you want to look for our twice weekly blog. And then we've got the YouTube channel. This podcast is on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes as well, and we welcome your feedback and comments. What do you like about this? What questions do you have? What would you like to see in there? Do get in touch. Drop us a line. Comment, subscribe, as they say. Hit that subscribe button, I think, is what all the people on YouTube say. So I'm going to say it. Right. Until next time. Goodbye. It's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
See you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.